Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. President Ramaphosa spent 44.9 million rands for 4 events in just 8 months. And all of these events happened within the campaign window, within the election year window. So people are raising questions about whether these events were ANC election events and not necessarily official government events as they were indicated. But before we talk about that main story for today, 100 days is a significant marker in a presidential term. And today, this Sunday, the 4th of August, marks 50 days since the election of President Ramaphosa by Parliament and the signing of the coalition statement of intent. So where are we 50 days into the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, the second term of office of President Cyril Ramaphosa? Number one, the leaders of the ANC and the Democratic Alliance are insulting each other in the media. Number two, the rand is still trading at the 1:18 mark. You remember what the markets and the market media were promising during the coalition negotiations. They said that if you get an ANC and DA coalition, the rand is going to fall to 17.5. That has not materialized. Some cabinet ministers have been active. They've tried to really capture the public imagination, reveal corruption in their government units and departments. And some of those cabinet ministers have received mixed reviews. For instance, Gayton McKenzie was applauded for revealing and being transparent about the funding of artists during COVID-19, some of the people who received large amounts of money from his department that he thinks needs further explanation. The cancellation of superfans, for example, was something that was celebrated. However, he has been criticized for continuing to make remarks which are deemed as xenophobic, Afrophobic, in particular in respect to the issue of the Miss South Africa contestant. So that's a mixed review for him. But some people are very happy with how he has been conducting himself in respect to the Olympics, in respect to meeting athletes, that kind of thing. He hasn't seemed to do much in terms of arts and culture. You know, we just saw a report that the National School of Arts is facing a budget cut, and there are some challenges there. We haven't seen him speak much about that. It seems as if his attention has been solely on sports. But that's what has been happening. Some cabinet ministers have just given speeches for their budgets that we saw in Parliament in the mini plenaries for the budgets to be passed, but we haven't seen them since. There are no new plans that have been revealed on dealing with unemployment, with crime, that have particularly materialized. And President Ramaphosa had promised that, there would be such a revelation, but it hasn't yet materialized. We're also seeing that ministers are fighting about who is getting more media attention. We've seen ANC ministers complaining that DA ministers are looking better than them, and that needs to be addressed. And that was reported as something that was raised in the NWC of the ANC and something that was meant to be raised in the NEC as well. So we haven't seen a lot of progress. And I wonder what you think that means for the second term of Ramaphosa administration. Is he moving slowly, deliberately? Or do you think he's moving without real capacity to effect change? Or do you think that there are divisions? Let's go to the main story. 44.9 million for 4 events. These costs were disclosed to Parliament this week by Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Velinkosi Hlabisa in a written reply to questions from a member of the Democratic Alliance, Frederick Badenhorst. Hlabisa told Parliament that between October 2023 and May this year, which was basically the height of the election campaign season before the elections, the government spent 44.9 million for the president to listen to service delivery complaints at the one-day presidential imbizo gatherings. That's basically 45 million. I'm going to start saying 45 million from now. So where was this money spent? How was this money spent? Number one, the provincial government of the Northwest and Kokda spent 4.8 million hosting the presidential imbizo in Potchefstroom on the 23rd of October last year. Potchefstroom, right? On the 7th of December last year, the Free State government spent 11.1 million on the imbizo held at Velcom, right? And this was spent, so basically provincial government spent 11.1 million, and then COGTA spent another 1 million, making it 12.1 million. The third event, provincial government of Mpumalanga, they spent the most amount of money, 14.9 million on the 7th of March in the town of Emalahleni. 14.9 million. You know, there's a lot of outrage about the EFF getting 16 million from VBS, right? They say, no, this was corruption. The money that the EFF got should be repaid. How can the EFF say that they are representing the poor if they got 16 million? Let me ask you now, these expenses that I'm reading, 4.8 million Northwest, 11.1 million Free State, 14.9 million Mpumalanga, and then also on the 11th of May, just a few weeks before the election, the Northern Cape spent 8.6 million for the president to spend the day under a marquee with the residents of Kurman. And Tlabisa's department added to that, adding 4.3 million. That is 12.9 million rands that was spent on a presidential imbizo during an election year. Do you think this was good use of expenditure? What was the money spent on? The money was spent on procuring marquees. It was spent on other infrastructure, such as sound systems, mobile toilets. It was spent on transportation of members of the public to and from the imbizo events. It was spent on food and drink, and members of the public are typically given food parcels which contain sandwiches, fruit juice, and bottled water. Right? And apparently, all of this is done in a procurement plan with all of the intergovernmental stakeholders. So there's apparently a joint imbizo procurement work stream where different intergovernmental departments work together to allocate tenders for the transport, for the marquees, all of this. Now, some questions which come up. Was this an ANC gravy train for the different people providing the toilets, the food parcels, all of this? Is this another way for comrades to eat from the provincial departments? I can't rule it out. This looks to me like chowing. It's just the money. I know this is nominations. I know, comrades. No. More questions. Should politicians use government resources during elections? Is it fair? In other parts of the world, once the election date is announced, ministers no longer occupy their positions. The prime minister or president remains in that office to occupy that office in case, of emergency, etc., etc. There's a necessity to maintain that. But there's no use of the office in and of itself to campaign. If you recall, Rishi Sunak could not use any government funding to campaign once he declared the election date. He could not do that. Cabinets dissolved, parliaments dissolved. You can't use any apparatus of the state. Shouldn't that be something that is considered also for South Africa? The reality is the presidential desk seems to have used resources of the state to campaign. You're supposed to use your own money for these things. Donald Trump will go to rallies that will be paid for by the Republican Party. Kamala Harris will go to rallies that will be paid for by the It can't be just a vice presidential event. And if she tried to do that, there would be complaints that resources of the state are being used for Kamala Harris. Isn't that something that has to be considered? Were these presidential imbizos campaigning? I think that they were campaigning. Does the president listen to the submissions made by the people at these events? I think that in the first instance, any submissions by the public in terms of substantive can be made by various other representatives of his political party to him, if that is the purpose of it. I don't think that the thing of I'm going to go to the ground as the president to listen to people in a tent and then I'm going to understand the problems of South Africa is one that is necessarily a good use of time or even a scientific method, especially if you only go to 4 places. 4 places for 45 million rands to listen to Issues of the people are known. They are reported by Stats South Africa. They are reported by political representatives. They are reported by councillors. They are reported by the media. Realistically, the president cannot really say that he's participating in primary research. This is a form of primary research. Surveys, interviews, discussions with people at the coalface of anything considered primary. Really, I mean, come on. The president cannot say that he's participating in primary research. There are other institutions that can provide him with quality information about the issues that the people are facing. Also, does the president listen to these submissions? I don't really think that a lot of issues have been raised by community members where they can come back and say that these things were actually done after a rally. You know, at some point, one of the ladies told him that she couldn't get a job for a very long period of time, and it didn't even seem as if he cared, right? And she was crying and things, and they only did something for her after there was public outcry. Should transportation and food be provided at government events? Is this not a form of buying votes? It's a question for you. Do you think that transportation and food should be provided? If you have an event, let the people come on their own feet if they want to listen to you. I think that part of this is like padding the numbers, right? The Orlando Pirates doesn't provide anybody with free transport to come to the Orlando Stadium, but it's packed because there is a real appetite to watch that soccer, to a real affiliation with club membership. I think this thing of using state resources to bus people around to listen to a politician during an election is something that needs to be reflected on. Many people within the ANC and also even Tlhabisa himself say that this was a good use of money, but I'm not persuaded that it was. And I think we have to be consistent, and the media has to also be consistent. If you criticize one wasteful use of money or use of money that seems to be corrupt or unethical on one side, do it consistently on the other side as well. I don't know. What do you guys think? 45 million for 4 events during an election year. Was that good use of money? What do you think? What do you think about this reporting from Sunday Times? Till the next one.